what happened was we had taken out all the enemy threats in the area that we were working, or at least pushed them south. And there was another town that was letting us know the Taliban were there, and they were trying to hurt us, and they were going to hurt them. And so, of course, our mission was to, eliminate the threat. So we decided to pick up all of our stuff, move into a new building, which is a little ways away in a different town, and, start our patrols and our routine patrols, the same thing we had been doing, just somewhere else. And so once, we went into the compound, like I said earlier, we were told that it was clear, that there was no injury, nobody was there. There's no Taliban, there's no IEDs, there was no nothing. And everybody got a little complacent. We felt safe. We put our stuff down. We go on the rooftop, and as soon as I tell my guys stay put, and I jump off the roof, I land on a 30-pound bomb. And what happened was that it was hidden underground, and they ran what's called command wire to a pressure plate. So they run a metal signature to these wooden blocks, and these things basically, when you touch them together, they make the spark, and it sets off the IED. And because we all went up it, and I think it had rained a couple days before, it was stuck, so this pressure plate wasn't creating any friction. But once I jumped off of it with all my gear on and everything, that's about 200 pounds of stuff, it slapped it, and the bomb went off. And with the bomb going off, I don't remember the initial pain. I just remember being on my back and looking up, and I see these like little lights flickering all over the place, and I didn't really know what happened, and I just kind of went into shock. And I remember just hearing everything muffled: "Do not move. Look for secondaries." And it was the sound of my captain telling guys, "Don't move," because what happened was the Taliban would put an ID here, and then they would put another one here. So when you got hurt here, the person running to grab you, you step on an ID as well. And now you have two casualties out of the fight, and or two soldiers, Marines, airmen, Navy, whatever. I mean, anybody who's out there. So any service member that would step on this would, eventually be out of the fight. And I just remember my doc, Tommy Casey, running up to me and going, "Hey, buddy, you're gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be all right." And I didn't really know what was going on, so I was like, "Okay, all right, no problem." And I just remember like looking down a little bit, and I started seeing blood all over my uniform. And I was like, man, I must have stepped on an IED. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, "Hey, man, how bad is it?" He's like, "No, you're good. You're all right." And he gives me my first dose of morphine, and I'm starting to feel really cold, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And they're all crying, and they're like, "Hey, Ferrari, you're going to be all right." Because they used to call me Ferrari in the Marine Corps. "Ferrari, you're going to be all right." I'm like, "All right." And all I hear is, "Bravo, Mike, Foxtrot 7229. And I start hearing what's called the 9-line medevac being put over the radio. And that's basically giving our grid coordinates to our helicopters for them to land on a LZ and a landing zone, and basically be prepared on the helicopter with blood supply, because when you step on an IED and you have some type of traumatic amputation, you're losing a lot of blood, and the only thing stopping it is these tourniquets. And so of course when they're doing Bravo, Mike, Foxtrot, Bravo was the company I was assigned to. Mike is the phonetic alphabet for M, and Foxtrot is for F, and 7229 was the last of my social. And of course, like, they're giving out all the blood supply and whatnot. And it seemed like it was like 45 minutes I was sitting there, but really it was a lot quicker. I think it was like 20 minutes. There was already a helicopter in the area. And so I remember the helicopter coming in, and they picked me up in this litter, and they're all like taking me out to the landing zone. And my buddy McCardle's rifles hit me in the face. And I just remember going, "Hey, asshole," like just kind of slinging them off. And he's like, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry." And they're all crying. And I'm like, "Hey, it's all right. It's all right. It's going to be okay." And I'm like starting to kind of get a little tired at that point. I guess the medication started wearing, the blood loss. And I remember them putting me on the helicopter, and you get a kick out of this. I was already starting to hallucinate a little bit because of the morphine, and I was just like shot. That I remember 2 green lights over here, and I'm thinking it's like aliens or something. I'm like, "What is it?" And they start looking at me, and they go, "You're going home, soldier." And I go, "I'm not a soldier. I'm an effing Marine," whatever. And so they just start laughing, because they're Army. And so they start laughing, and they throw up the thumbs up. And I just remember, going out, and I passed out and must have fell asleep. And I woke up in Bagram, which is a small airport in Afghanistan, where they would begin, emergency surgery to stop the bleeding and stabilize me. And then they would send me over to Landstuhl, Germany, which is where they do the emergency surgeries. They stabilize everything. They have you on medication. They put you on the IV drops and whatever else. And they contact your family, let them know that, hey, you're stable or you're not stable or whatever the case is. And then they get you, ready to go back to Walter Reed in Washington.
Okay. Were your legs blown off immediately?
Yeah, both legs were gone
Okay.
below the knees immediately. I didn't know that until
Okay.
Germany.
That was the next question.
Yeah, when I woke up in Germany, I remember looking down and they had those like ace bandages, like the white ace bandages around my legs. And I just remember looking down. I'm like, what happened? You know, and I looked at the nurse. She's like, well, you stepped on an IED and, you know, you lost your legs below the knees. And I'm just thinking like, okay, you know, like what else am I going to say at that point? And I was so medicated that I don't think I could have fought that anyway. But I just remember saying like, you know, she goes, well, where do you know where you're at? And I'm like, I don't know how to say the name. It's like Llama Stool or something, you know. And she's laughing. She's like, yeah, you're in Germany. And I said, okay. And so they stabilized me there, and basically they were like, hey, in 24 hours, going to fly you back to the United States. And I just remember it was always thumbs up. I just like thumbs up everybody to death because my mouth was dry. I got cotton mouth. I couldn't really talk too much just from all the the nasal cannula and everything else I had going on. So yeah, that's when really everything kind of started becoming a little bit more real of my injury when I saw that. And she talked to me a little bit, and they put me on the plane. You know, we go on a helicopter and then a plane back to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in DC.
I'm always amazed you have this happen, and it must be shock. You don't feel anything.
I mean, the one thing that I did remember was I broke my pelvis and shattered my femur with the injury. And the only thing I don't remember the legs hurting. I just remember my femur and my pelvis. That hurt so stinking bad, because the femur broke in half and the pelvis separated. So that was a pretty severe injury that they had to put what's called an external fixator on both sides of my pelvis to stabilize the pelvis. And they did an internal rod inside of my right femur. So they stabilized that, and then I didn't have to have an external fixator for it. But that was the most painful thing. I think it was like a bruised feeling. It's like, when you have a bruise and you push on it, it felt like that times 1,000. It was like, oh my, any movement was like super sensitive. So that, it's crazy. I remember everything, which is, I guess, the part that I didn't have a TBI. But sometimes, I look back and I'm like, I can't believe how much I can still remember, from the actual night. I remember being freezing cold because they cut my clothes off. And like I said, it's 130 degrees during the day, but at nighttime it drops like 90, but it feels like it's 20 just because of the difference in the temperature. And I remember they cut all my clothes off because they had to start seeing if I had any other injuries, or whatever, whatnot. And I was just like, oh, I'm just so cold. They put a blanket on me and they're like, all right. And there was a really nice man who gave me a little bit of Jello on the plane. I'll remember that. I don't remember what color it was, but I remember he gave me some Jello because I was like, I'm dying of thirst. Can you please give me water? And then you can't have any solids or liquids because you're going to be put in an X-ray machine and a CAT scan and this and that and the other. So we weren't really allowed. But he was like, all right, just don't tell nobody. So he gave me some Jello, and I'm like, thank you, God. I'm just like, give me another one.
I hope it wasn't red. That's the big no-no with those machines, right? The red dye.
Yeah, I don't know what. I have no idea what color it was. It must have been like orange or yellow.